Thank you very much, Karen, Chief Scientist Ian Chubb and Sheriff, and ladies and gentlemen. Firstly, I'd like to acknowledge my colleague Laura Ward, who shares with me the privilege of preparing this presentation. So,
You may have to use the mouse.
oh, I hate mice.
Oh, there you go.
We're fine, we're fine. So, how are we going there? Okay, so if diabetes was a country, this slide shows it all, diabetes would be the third largest country in the world after India and China. Something like 400 million people with diabetes now. India and China, in fact, have combined about 1/3 of all the people with diabetes in the world, but I think this emphasises where diabetes stands. It's now the fastest growing epidemic in human history, and it's predicted that there'll be over 500 million people with diabetes. Yeah, it works. The question is, where do I point it? So as Karen mentioned, recently in December last year, we staged the World Diabetes Congress, which in fact was the largest health conference ever held in Australia. So some of the facts about the World Diabetes Congress is they're organised by the International Diabetes Federation that's based in Brussels. They're usually held every 2 years, and the last Congress 2 years ago was in Dubai. Here we are. And we had the Convention Bureau help us have a stand there. We had a leading Indigenous figure playing the didgeridoo all day, the delegates. We had the Melbourne team there. In the middle there's a bear. I think we tried to get in a kangaroo, but I think it was banned. But, so there was a lot of publicity at pre-Congress events overseas. The last time a Congress for Diabetes was held in Australia, there was 3,000 or 4,000 delegates in Sydney in 1988. And the purpose of these congresses is to bring, diabetes is quite unique. There's a very strong lay person involvement in diabetes. So the Congress program contains a special section for people, lay people, which I'll mention to you before, apart from the science. And it was a full house, and this must have caused palpitations for Karen and her team. I think it's the first time the Melbourne Congress Centre was fully utilised, all the rooms. You can just see here, this is the foyer, and it was just packed. And this was like every day the picture at the Congress. So what about the 2013 Congress? As Karen mentioned, we had over 10,300 delegates. I think it was 10,305. But as Karen mentioned, people bring their partners, and there are at least 3,000 partners, many exhibitors from the pharmaceutical and the health industry. As we mentioned, the whole of the facility of the Congress Centre was used. And as Karen again mentioned, there's a flow on elsewhere. There was a satellite meeting in Geelong, in Lorne, at the G, at our own institute, several satellite meetings, and at other venues. And as Karen mentioned again, 63 million was brought to the Victorian economy. I'd love to see some flow back into my pocket, but I'm not sure that that's going to happen. The basic statistics were that, as we mentioned, 10,300 delegates from 140 countries. So it was officially the largest medical congress ever held in Australia. We had 7 streams in the scientific program. We had a basic research and clinical stream, we had a public health and epidemiology, one on global diabetes. We had, for the first time ever for a World Diabetes Congress, an Indigenous stream, and not only a very strong representation from the Australian Indigenous community, but people from Canada, New Zealand, the United States, Brazil, the countries where there are quite large Indigenous communities. And these people have some of the highest rates of diabetes in the world. Something like 25% of adults in indigenous communities have diabetes. And the picture below was we had a lay component stream. We also had an education stream and a history of diabetes stream. The crowd you see in this room was for this well-known Pakistani cricketer, or former cricketer, Zimett, packed out. And there was another room in the Congress Centre packed, and people were knocking on the doors to get in just to hear this very charismatic figure. We had 405 speakers from 51 countries, and in terms, people submit their own research to the Congress. This was the largest number of abstracts ever submitted to a Congress. What I do have to say is that one of the reasons we attracted, because it's very hard, I was president of the Obesity Congress, World Obesity Congress in 2006 in Sydney. We got 2,500, 3,000 people. People, you know, travelling to Australia is a bit of a problem for them. But we actually offered the speakers business class airfares. It affected the Congress profits, but people couldn't give up the offer, obviously, of a business class trip to Australia. And I think it's a very important key element in terms of the success. How was it won for Australia? People in the good old days, a group of people like myself would go to the Congress Bureau and would submit a proposal to an international meeting some 5 years ahead. This time the IDF sent their CEO to Melbourne just after the Congress Centre had opened, and the decision was made for Melbourne. Now this caused a lot of trouble. We had people in Sydney abusing, slandering myself and some Melbourne colleagues because they thought we had stolen the Congress when the Congress decision was actually made by the IDF. But we obviously gave a lot of support to the getting the Congress to Melbourne, and I must say, probably generously but incorrectly, and this is just a picture at the Club Melbourne dinner, or cocktail party. Louise Asher, our Deputy Premier, or Deputy, she's also Minister for Tourism, was presenting awards to people for bringing congresses to Melbourne. So generously I was given one, but I'm not sure that I really deserved it, and I'm happy to give it back, Karen.
It's fine.
What I do want to mention was the fantastic collaborative approach here in Victoria, particularly from the Melbourne Convention Bureau, that the Victorian government was very generous, and Laura, whom I co-author on this presentation, was lent to us by the Minister of Health as to help me with arrangements. It was a great arrangement, and all of these other groups were involved basically in bringing the Congress, not only winning it but delivering the event. These are the type of people who came to the Congress: specialist physicians, medical researchers, advocates from national organisations for diabetes around the world, pharmaceutical companies, public health people, policy makers, diabetes educators, and people with diabetes. And I mentioned Zimett, but also one of our stars at the Congress was, was Kathy Freeman, who has got diabetes and has been a very active advocate for diabetes, and Sue Alberti, who many of you will know as the Vice President of the Western Bulldogs. They're not doing very well, but she is the largest donor for diabetes, philanthropist in Australia. She has diabetes, her daughter died of diabetes, and these were the types of people who came to the Congress. And spectacular, some over 100 young people with diabetes from around the world came at the opening ceremony. They were in their national dress that says "I have diabetes" in various languages, and this was a first in terms of their group. I want to mention the government I was going to say invasion, it almost was, government engagement, and the Minister David Davis, who I'll mention again in a minute, was, here we go for the laser, with the president of the International Diabetes Federation. There were walks every morning. There's healthy food available in the Congress Centre. And as I mentioned earlier on, there was Kathy Freeman and Wasim Akram and other sports personalities with diabetes there. And in the trade display area, Laura, along with our Parliamentary Secretary for Health, Georgie Crozier, who was very much part of the Congress as well, chairing and doing a lot of good PR for Victoria, took part. Now, there were new initiatives of this Congress. As I mentioned, the Indigenous stream went on very well indeed. There was a launch of a partnership between the Hollows Foundation and the IDF to tackle diabetic eye disease around the world. A new network of parliamentary friends of diabetes around the world was established, and they had the first ever Parliamentary Champions Diabetes Forum. This was hosted by Minister David Davis, who appears here, who again was a huge supporter of the Congress. And there is now, and I think there's like 50 or 60 parliamentarians from different countries around the world who participated. So what about experience of the IDF? Well, Melbourne came out sensationally. Firstly, we were told afterwards, many emails, this was an outstanding scientific program. The Congress Centre is right bang in the middle of the city. I was in Rome 2 years ago. We had to go 60 kilometres for the European Diabetes meeting out of Rome, $60, $70 euro if you wanted to take a taxi, otherwise it was a train and 2 buses, you know. So this is a huge plus for the city. Most Congress centres are on peripheries of cities. The trade exhibition I thought was fantastic. It's one of the best trade exhibitions I've ever seen. There's a lot of people congregating there because there was also very good food being served in the venue, but it was highly utilised, and all the pharmaceutical companies and health groups were absolutely delighted with the results. So what were the benefits for Victoria? Well, they're sort of listed here, and again, I think Karen's covered most of them, but the tourism side of things, with the economic benefit, not only from the delegates, but their partners, obviously highlighted Melbourne. We had a spectacular opening ceremony, and I have to say, much better than any of the politicians or the scientists. Robbie Doyle, our Mayor, Lord Mayor, he sold Melbourne to everyone. I'm sure he boosted it from 50 million to 63 million in terms of the income for Victoria. Obviously there was an increased awareness now of diabetes locally, and I have to emphasise that it's a huge problem, diabetes. The Australian government, the one commitment for health that the coalition gave pre the elections was to establish a National Diabetes Strategy Task Force, which I'm now co-chairing. So at least one promise from the last election has been fulfilled. And I think this Congress also drew attention to the diabetes research and care here in Victoria. So finally, I want to just mention again what a great team effort was. Karen hasn't given me any money to plug things, but we had fantastic support from the Convention Bureau. One of the major societies for diabetes wanted to have a satellite meeting 3 months out from ours, which would have seriously affected our meeting. They had a booking here. The Convention Bureau chucked them out. I'm sure, well, they said you can't do it here and compete against that. They've been very much the interests of the group running Congress is looking after those interests. So there we have it. I think that we have a challenge here now for other medical groups. The World Cardiology meeting will be here soon. I think they're trying to beat our record. I'm not sure if they'll be lucky. The HIV/AIDS Congress will be here, I think, in May or June, and they're already bragging that they're going to build us over the head and beat our numbers, but that still stands to be seen.
Thank you.